actually one of the last to start doing feminized seeds, because I just thought I was very misinformed on what FEMs were, how they worked, what the benefits were. Um, any FEM I really had really wasn't the best. But again, it was because the seeds I was popping were just shit. They weren't the best, popping from European feminized breeders. And no offense to them, but like, look, you're only as good as the strains you start with. I don't care who you are, or how long you've been doing this. You're only as good as the strains you start with. Europe's over there at the time, they're fucking with haze and this junk and that junk. And unfortunately, it was just stuff that nobody really wanted here in America. Um, so anytime I popped a fem from Europe, it was junk. But I didn't understand what the benefits to feminized seeds were. So I remember my buddy from Soulfire, he's a dear friend of mine, Lonnie. He's like, bro, we got to figure this feminized thing out. And I had tried it and failed. I hadn't given up on it, but I was definitely after a failure. And I was like, fuck, man, this is annoying. He's like, look, I'm gonna write a protocol and we're gonna follow it together and we're gonna see what happens. So he writes this protocol, based on my failures, based on some new information that he found. So we just kind of culminated it all together. He's like, we need to get this fem thing down to make some fem seeds. We were making them for a completely different reason. At the time, we just wanted to introduce fems. We wanted to break into the feminized seed market because we had been using males and females for so long. Um, well, we made some adjustments, we made some changes, and the protocols ended up working. Now we've adjusted and perfected them over the years, but at first we realized like, holy shit, we were able to reverse a female successfully at the right time in order to pollinate our whole donor plants, and had a successful seed harvest, which was really kind of, for us, we were like, shit, this is great. We had no idea what we were about to unlock and discover. And really, through more and more feminized breedings, the data and just kind of based on what we had, based on the experience and making fem seeds, the discoveries were crazy down the line. Like, we found that feminized seeds are absolutely, and I'll argue this with anybody out there. You'll get guys that say, oh, feminized seeds are unstable. Feminized seeds don't grow very strong plants. Feminized seeds this, feminized seeds that. It's all bullshit. Feminized seeds will have herm problems if you start with plants that have herm problems. Feminized seeds will be little, like, not the biggest, bulkiest looking plants if you start with plants that aren't the biggest, bulkiest plants. So what we found was, what the fuck is on my lip? Do I got some shit on my lip?
I
Oh,
can't see.
I got tortilla on my lip. So we were trying to get something in my stomach because my acid was killing me. Anyway, so what we found is like I was saying earlier, you're only as good as the plants that you start with. But what we found is that when you take a male and a female together, you have a female that is good, right? You wouldn't breed with it if it's not good. Well, at least that's the idea that you start with. You shouldn't if it's not good. Some dildos out there would do that, but hey, no names. But some people would just do it for funsies, and that's cool. But to like do it, sell it, get them to people, try to further genetics, it's a fucked up thing to do. But again, back to the principle, your female's good. The variable you have in there is you don't know what your male is going to bring to the table, right? Because it's a male. It grows ball, pollen sac, stamen. It doesn't grow pistils. It generally doesn't have frost. There are frosty males. And for a long time, I was a proponent of finding the frosty male to grow, to pollinate my females, which was why at the time I really believe I was producing such frosty plants, because that Starfighter F2 produced frosty male plants, which was wild at the time, which helped propel my regular seeds. But what I found later on in the FEMs was, when you start with a male and a female, you don't know what the male is. You have to like go through process of elimination. The way I would do it is I would start with, 10, 20 fucking males. When I would narrow it down, I would then, weed out the ones I didn't like. Maybe it was too short, maybe it was too tall. maybe it didn't grow the best. Then I would throw them into flower, and then maybe some would stretch too much. Maybe some didn't grow, stack properly the male parts versus other things. Maybe some smelled a little bit better, but once I got to about the 2 week mark in flower, I would have to make a decision on which male I was going to use. Not a lot of people did that. A lot of people would just pop some seeds, select their best male in veg, and that was the male they were going to use in the end. But again, that's flawed as well because you don't even know what it's not flowering. You don't know the traits. All you know, that thing's going to stretch times 5 and be an undesirable plant. Now you just pollinated your whole fucking female harvest with that. So again, even doing it the way I did, I could select it for size, structure, growth, what little smell you can get from a plant that doesn't have flowers on it. Yeah, you might get a little frost on it here on some males, which is great. But again, that's the most you can select for. You don't know if that shit's going to grow fire or not. So you would always have this variable in regular seeds because 50% of the genes that go into the plant are unknown. You don't know what they're going to be. And not only, even if that plant was amazing, you're still going to throw genes and alleles and other parts of the genetic sequence. You're going to throw shit that's back in its past, its whole genome. You're going to throw things from his uncle, its aunts, its grandmas, all that shit. So not only do you hope that plant is good, but you're hoping those plants that it started off with are good, which we all know a lot of these plants came from land races early on. Well, not so much anymore, but the further you go back, the shittier the weed gets. I hate to say it. The old timers who were like, "Oh, I remember smoking fucking Maui Wowie and Panama Red, and it just put me on my ass, bro." That shit was trash. All right, it might have been ahead of its time for its time, but it's not. And I even had some old timers admit that shit. They're like, "Bro, this weed is nothing like the shit we smoked." But then you always come across the guys who say, "Oh, back in my day." But again, when you're selecting male and female together, it's half variable. You don't know what you're going to get. So you have to grow the plants out. Some of them would be junk. Some of them would be great. It was always this like battle of hopefully I get more good ones than bad ones. So those are the problems with reg seeds. With fem seeds, that shit all disappears. You start with the female that you want. If you got 5 girls that you want to impregnate and make seeds with, like you were doing with males and females, you say, okay, these are my 5 winners. I'm going to go cross this male to it. But instead of crossing the male to it, you're crossing a female that you know is fire. For whatever reason it's frosty, it's purple, it smells great, it's awesome, it tastes good, it blows hard. Like, it's fire before you're even going to try to reverse it and pollinate other plants with it. So with that being said, when you put awesome with awesome, the chances that you're going to get awesome out is high. It's very high. Now, yes, there are failures and shit happens. But more times than not, you end up with fucking awesome from awesome. And which was very revolutionary in the feminized seed game, because I don't know that if people realize this or not, or maybe the selections at the time just weren't the best, but anything I've ever made with fems, I stopped making regs because feminized are so far better than regs ever will be. And then you'll get some people that are like, "Oh, well, you shouldn't breed with feminized seeds because it'll promote instability in other plants." Also a fucking lie that I thought that was true. There's no facts or base in that. Yes, if you start with unstable plants that throw balls, sure, you're going to transfer that into the other plants. But the fact of the matter is that as long as you start with solid genetics first, it doesn't matter if that shit is reversed or a feminized plant or a regular plant. It's going to transfer those genes to the next generation. Granted, yes, you should grow it out to see what you get and figure out how good, and if not, what you end up with. But the moral of the story is when you cross fire with fire, you usually get fire. And that's why I've continued to make fems and exclusively made fems since then.